Hey everybody, do you have AI coding envy? You're watching Techstrong Gang. Hey everybody, and welcome back to the Techstrong Gang. We have our usual lineup of folks talking about three of the most compelling topics of the day. Let me start with our friends from Futurum. Mitch Ashley is back. It's been a minute since you've been on the show, Mitch. How you doing?
It's been a minute. I tackled that guy running out of the 7-Eleven, stealing some stuff, and I injured my shoulder. No, I didn't really. It's just, my shoulder. I did some shoulder surgery. Nobody believes that story when I tell it anyway, so I'm going to have to stop telling it. But doing well here in Colorado.
So are you going in for Tommy John surgery? And, when will you be back on the mound?
Well, I'm supposed to be out there throwing some balls next week, so we'll see. We'll see what my recovery looks like. I wouldn't count on me up on the mound anytime soon, though.
Warming up. Also, Guy Currier from Futurum joins us once again. Guy is still in Austin, I believe. Is this the longest you've been in Austin for a continuous stretch now? It almost feels like it's been like 10 days.
I think it's been over 10 days. I was actually slated to go to a vendor conference this week, and thankfully, I was able to cancel that. So. Yeah, it's been maybe 2 weeks since I had to go anywhere, and I looked at my June schedule, and it looked pretty good. So I'm pretty happy about that.
All right, Guy Currier breaking vendor hearts once again. So who knows, man? All right.
Usually I break their hearts by working for them, but anyway.
There you have it. And also, still north of the border, Chris Blask, how you doing?
I'm loving life, Mike. How are you?
I'm well, no issues. I'm also down here in Boca Raton in the studio for one more day. I'll be heading back to New York after this. So tomorrow when you see me, I'll be back in my usual New York environs. But let's start jumping into the topics of the day. Mitch Ashley, I swear, a year ago, I was amazed and overawed by all this AI coding stuff. Now I wake up every morning and there's another tool. It's just like one right after the other. And I'm trying to figure out if these new tools, these players and startups are going to take over this whole app DevOps conversation, or will the incumbents win this argument and win the day? And you have a report that kind of talks about the level of investments that folks are starting to make in agentic AI already, as far as app dev is concerned anyway. Walk us through what's going on here, because I also have a third possibility, but let's just go through the report a little bit.
Okay, great. Yeah, it's an interesting, actually a fascinating space to cover, because I can't write something and have it be current by the time I publish it. There's 3 new announcements that I should have talked about if I would have waited, but then again, there'd be 3 more after that. So it's pretty fascinating. I mean, you have some very new players, the folks like the Codium, now Cursor, products, the Windsurf that's going to be acquired by OpenAI, but you have, existing players, Microsoft, GitHub, of course, combination of that. So and then you have no code, low code players. There's a lot of things happening in this market, but as I looked at it, what I'm telling people right now, telling vendors, if you aren't engaged in figuring out more than just what your AI strategy is, but putting to work and figuring out how you can make it useful, beneficial, maybe improve the work that's being done by whatever your constituent personas are, whether they're testers or software engineering people or people doing software security, operations, platform engineering, you name it. Now's the time to engage, because what I see is the level of engagement, especially on the development end, where things obviously start in terms of creating software, is pretty phenomenal. The iteration cycle from vendors is very short, kind of like DevOps cycles. They shorten their product cycles so much. And they're also doing essentially alpha betas, but they're doing even earlier. They call them public previews or research previews. And even at Microsoft Build a couple of weeks ago, they were very upfront and say, we just GA'd this, but we've got these other things that are out there now in public preview. We want to hear what you like. We want to hear what you don't like. Tell us, because we'll fix it. There's a lot of in-field learning that's happening both by practitioners and vendors at once. So number one, get engaged, and you have to learn by doing. This is not, let's lay out a strategy and just kind of carve the course, keep the situation normal, and we'll add this into our product in the next release 6 months from now. there may not be an opportunity for you. I'm not saying panic, but I don't think passively waiting from the vendor standpoint. Now, the practitioners, not everybody is jumping off the deep end and vibe coding, right? There are definitely people on the front end, on the leading edge that are leveraging these tools. But there's a lot of people that are benefiting from even just within VS Code and code completion and doing some early code generation kind of capabilities. But as more things get automated, especially with agents in the development process and expanding down the SDLC, that's when I think we're going to see the big improvements in productivity.
I'm kind of caught in a couple of different thoughts on this whole thing. So in my mind, every coding tool is going to have AI. I mean, at some point, it's just standard operating procedure becomes a core capability. If you don't have it, it probably won't exist. The part I'm trying to figure out is, so will my existing DevOps platforms get these AI agents, and then that will become the mechanism that I use to manage all that? Or will there be some sort of like higher level of abstraction of AI agents that leverage across all these different platforms, and that becomes the thing that I'm going to standardize on? And I don't know, maybe that thing talks to various AI agents that are made available by the CI/CD vendor or whoever happens to have a particular agent. But I'm trying to figure out, where is that orchestration of the DevOps workflow going to be? Do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, definitely. It's that's a big challenging problem to solve, especially cross-vendor, how you orchestrate agents and how you share data and information, even with MCP as an open standard that's evolved. Definitely what's happening is every vendor is adding AI agents, automation capabilities to their own product, which I think makes sense. Right now, it's a little tough for one person to step in and say, we're going to orchestrate all those things. I think that will happen at some point. But the thing that's also not happening is you don't see the big players saying, if you're going to be in our ecosystem, say a Microsoft ecosystem or a Google or AWS, you have to use all our stuff, right? We'll integrate with other people, but not with the same fidelity as our own. No, they're pretty much leaving it very open, knowing that they've got to work in a cross-vendor, cross-technology world, whether it's the models that you're using to generate code, the models that are now coming out for automation around what they're calling agentic DevOps. You'll see that agentic tied to everything here in product names, as well as just AI capabilities with their own tools. I think the big difference is, the chatbot and the natural language querying stuff and giving some basic instruction to is kind of the entry level of AI today. We'll see interfaces start to change as you're managing more work that bots are doing rather than you taking their output and putting it to work yourself.
Mitch, your call to vendors to, it's kind of like adopt or die, but maybe even ratchet it up a little bit. You say it in that silky voice of yours, but it really is quite a call to arms. But the other half of it, and you've written about this, you just didn't mention it a moment ago. The other part of it is, don't do it without forethought, understanding of how AI helps and potentially harms, and most importantly, with thoughtful, expert human supervision of the whole thing. That's a key corollary to and it's getting Chris all agitated. For those listening, he's been nodding vigorously as I say that. So that's what a really interesting twist here is. The vendors are practitioners as well. So you talked about practitioners. You're talking about what I would think of as enterprise practitioners. Although they go, down to like partners and even medium-sized businesses or the service organizations that do development for them, that would be pure practitioner. But the vendors are practitioners themselves. There's a lot. This has a huge damage circle or whatever you want to call it.
Blast radius,
yeah?
Yes.
See,
blast radius. Thank you.
Let's let Chris jump in. Good. Go ahead. I want to respond to what you're saying, Guy, but I want to hear what Chris is thinking too.
Oh, thank you, Mitch, because as Guy said, you do in fact have a silky voice. And I think the thing that my comment is, I can hear in all of you, there's this confusion, this narrative space where we're talking about how we're using AI to develop tools. And with three of the world's leading experts, how do we actually get there? right? And I think you all touched on points of it. This isn't just a tooling race; it's a trust war. And the winners aren't those who ship the most AI. They're the ones who make it safe, visible, and native to the developer psyche, right? These tools will do wonderful things, but if you're not comfortable with doing them, it doesn't really matter.
Yeah, I'm actually preparing a piece right now based on what I've observed of the data analytics vendor Click over the last year or so. They created a trust council. I'm not, going to, flog their particular strategy, but it was a nice jumping off point for exactly what you're talking about, Chris, which is this visibility side, this transparency side of things, critically important.
So, Mitch, how long does it take a DevOps team to bring in a new tool and adjust their workflows? Because it seems to me it takes a good year to kind of wrap your head around that. It's not like I go out and buy a tool and just slam it in. At least I don't think so. So, what's the curve of actual usage in DevOps workflows, especially with a lot of tools that are quote unquote available in preview?
Well, the way I would think of the progression, Mike, is individual tools, things that aid you in your IDE that you use as a developer or whatever tool as a tester. So AI is introduced within the tools that you use. And now we see agents and automations, some agentic capabilities that automate more processes than just generating code. Generating code is actually a small part of developing software, believe it or not. That's probably, I don't know, less than 25%, maybe even 10 or 15% of the work. So what's happening now is some of those individual tasks are being automated. The next step is automating workflows across different teams. Duplo Cloud, for example, and a DevOps automation platform just came out with their AI announcement. So you're starting to see more DevOps products introducing it, not just development tool products. And I think the third step is really true pipelines, workflows across an entire SDLC process, everything from security to generating code to testing to scaling and performance and all those things that go into it. That's sort of the nirvana where I think we want to reach. We're far from that. Maybe far as 6 months. No, it's not going to be 6 months, but we're not there yet. We're still at the individual tool, kind of bumping into the doing automation for individuals and starting to do automation for teams. So to your question, it's really a personal endeavor. Not to say you don't get support from your management or your company or a team for doing it, but it's a learning curve. It's like, oh, there's this new thing called relational database. How does that work? Let's figure out how we should use that as opposed to the other structures of databases we use. Oh, there's no code now. How do we use that? It's kind of that process, that kind of adoption curve, but for all of how you create software. So whether you lean into it and do vibe coding or you kind of just gradually take it on a little bit more and more.
Yeah, and I would say that at least from the practitioner / enterprise side, we're going to see 80 to 90%. Maybe you already had 80%. And I don't remember from the research you've done using AI. But if you think about the application estate, it might only be 5% of it. I mean, this is a whole new. We need a new word for it. It was the digital transformation, refactor or recode or whatever. That's been well underway, and we might have 20% of applications now that are cloud native or cloud native-ish in a typical way. And that's a made up number, but it's really the minority.
So the part of this that leaves me scratching my head is, so there's a bunch of these startups, and historically, venture capitalists poured money in startups, and if they made it to an IPO, that was the exception. Generally speaking, they got acquired and rolled up and put into some other incumbent vendor. However, when I talk to the incumbent vendors in this space, they're all pretty far along on their own development efforts. And I have to wonder if a lot of these startups are going to have the wherewithal to make it long-term or even get acquired, because the incumbents are moving faster in the age of AI than they have historically. And I think they're not suffering as much of that innovator's dilemma. But Guy, what's your take?
Well, I'm glad you turned to me because I want to compliment Mitch on another thing. Before I attack him, I'll attack him in a minute. Listen, you have provided a really helpful framework for AI adoption and coding, which is, or in applications really, which is the AI enhanced app, the AI driven app, and the AI native app. And when we are talking about development platforms, there are some that are being enhanced. There are some that are agentic, relatively new. That's AI driven. That would be maybe the vibe coding concept. Correct me if I'm wrong. And then lastly, this AI native. So Mike, to answer your question, to what degree do these incumbents intend to essentially recode all the way down to the silicon, actually, in order to create something that's AI native? The AI enhanced stuff has serious limitations. They're partially security related, but mostly have to do with scale and volume of data. They run on infrastructure that's not necessarily built for, let alone the size, just the data usage patterns that come with AI. So they tend to incorporate services. A lot of the times these are cloud-based services, which have their own sources of latency or unavailability and all that other sort of thing. My sense is that Microsoft is trying to do this with GitHub Copilot, that they are essentially both recoding and refactoring that entire platform to turn it into something that's AI native. But my point, Mike, is that not everybody is Microsoft. There's lots of players here. Maybe Oracle can do what Microsoft is doing, but otherwise, there actually is a fair amount of space for like the Tab 9s of the world or whatever, these more recent AI native code platform companies to follow the exact path you are like you laid out, the sort of classic path. And also in general, in this hyper capitalistic environment that we are in, which by the way is not an insult, I support this. We have a great deal of difficulty predicting such things as a change in these models because there are so many, there's plenty of VCs out there, willing to invest and still in these sort of platforms. You put AI on it, they're willing to invest. So I think I see your point, but my guess is that we don't know what we don't know there. And there's going to be plenty of the same model going on.
All right, Mitch, last word. Mitch, last word on this subject.
I think there is plenty of room for acquisitions, even though the big guys, everybody is starting to address it at different paces. I think part of that is, FOMO, fear of being left behind also. But there's some, take OpenAI, right? Acquiring Windsurf, right? They had their own codecs that they created for developing software, but recognize that, for them to go and build a new kind of vibe coding IDE as opposed to a traditional IDE or a AI native IDE, which is kind of where the IDEs are headed, that would be a big lift. So just buy somebody, just bring them into the fold. Microsoft has acquired people along the way. So I don't know that there's any less opportunity. I think this normal thing will happen, Mike, of early people into the market. People are in the top three, as Alan and likes to quote Brad Feld often. It's the people that come much later that is really questionable what the opportunity to get acquired or go public then is. The third generation of startup that kind of solving the same problem, but unique twist on it in some little way. Maybe it's interesting, maybe it's not.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, place your bets because we're about to find out how all this is going to play out. We'll be back in a minute. Hey folks, we're moving on to the next block in our little trio, and we're talking about a report from our friends over the Futurum Group that kind of shows what people are thinking about. The level of spending on cybersecurity is roughly on average 11% of the IT budget. I think that's pretty standard. I hope that's standard. But it also finds that about half of the folks are trying to some degree to reduce the number of vendors they have. A quarter, however, are adding vendors, and the rest seem to be just standing pat. Chris, we've been talking a lot about the platformization of cybersecurity and this battle between best-of-breed tools and these centralized platforms and the arguments that go on back and forth in this thing. It would appear that folks kind of at least prefer some centralization, but it doesn't look to me like it was a massive wave. But what's your take on what's going on here? Or is this just an argument we have every 3 or 4 years?
Before we start with that one, I think, yes, this is an argument we have every 3 or 4 years. Yeah, let me refer back to what I said in the last segment. This isn't a tooling race, it's a trust race. And people seek, we like centralized platforms when it gets a little confusing because we really turn to one spot. But particularly in this space, as we continue on the path of weaving cybersecurity and AI together, the trust of the human part of it has to be the point. Can any of these vendors make the tools? Yes. In fact, with a $20 a month ChatGPT license, if you train your engine properly, to the last segment, you might be able to make the tools. So early movers, platform, range anxiety, sure. But at the end of the day, the vendors or the constellation of providers that will hold the ground are the ones who understand, to actually implement the trust.
Mitch, what's your take on the trust factor? Because to me, part of that trust has been, well, there isn't a lot of trust in these platforms because everybody complains about the number of false positives and the volume of alerts that they get. So, when I talk to a lot of folks, they have like 2 of everything just to double check one or the other and see which one they believe in.
It's sort of like the Monty Python Holy Grail, search for the Holy Grail of single point of truth or single glass of pain, as I like to say. Seeking that sort of nirvana of having one ring that rules them all that will make it easier. And what it's really is it's a reflection of the complexity of how difficult it is to bring all those different data sources together. I was mentioning in the last segment about the development tools of the vendors being much more open to a broader ecosystem than just trying to own the customer all on their own platform and their own tools. You even saw this similar kind of announcement at RSAC with Splunk talking about, we realize we can't put all of the data in our product as much as this is my words, like to do that and charge you for it. Where they're adding capabilities to go access data where it is and how it's located. You can see that in MCP servers and software development. So I think it's all about first stage is just getting the information you need to understand, to triage what's happening, understanding what the problem is and how to start addressing it. If AI is going to be a part of this role, I think it's got to take us out of the giving us better and more accurate information to actually helping us do the work. And that's, I think, probably more than the benefit we want to seek next than just trying to have one thing that's going to tell us all the right answers about everything.
I kind of felt like the research both revealed and hid what's going, or revealed the hidden nature of what's going on, that there is investment spending, let's say spending in time, people's time is ultimately money. That's that whole, DevSecOps side of things. Take the software bill of materials. I applaud the, return of the SBOM and the ability right now of AI to help build SBOMs, human validated, but to help build them. That's a real step forward. But would you call that a cyber investment? Not normally.
Yeah, I think part of that is, our compliance may be investment. I don't know. So it kind of goes both ways. But Chris, I want to get at something. We had Keith Townsend on the show yesterday talking about cybersecurity as it related to a Tech Field Day event. And one of the things that was posited is the future of security, maybe this whole conversation might be rendered moot because AI is going to create this kind of chat interface in front of all these cybersecurity engines. So I'm not really going to care about the centralized platform as much as I'm just going to have kind of a single interface that plugs and plays with different engines as I see fit.
It may be a little oversimplified to put it that way, but I think that's kind of effectively right. What you said is that, we're not going to have to dig around at all the details anymore, so much as have this single, AI interface that's going to tell us how it all works. I think on an individual level, as you're a stakeholder, a technologist, an engineer, a decision maker, that may kind of be effectively true, but we're still early in figuring this out, right? And I think when we look at the size and scope of the infrastructures that we're responsible for, whether it's a single server and you have all day to do it, we're physically past the point where a human being can read it all and know it all anyways. And we haven't yet come to the trust layer where we trust our tools, AI or not, to represent it to us. And if we are on the path that we are on of increasing complexity, and we are, then we have to get to that trust layer so that, while it may sound a little silly in 2025, at the beginning of June, to say that executives and operators will be literally making decisions and taking actions based on what some AI told them, in the right context, I think that's essentially exactly right.
Mhm. So, Guy, going back to the previous block, I'm going to ask you the same question. What is the level of disruption we should expect to see among the cybersecurity vendors per se? Will there be a wave of consolidation in the age of AI? And is this going to be kind of a recurring theme?
That's a really good question. I find cybersecurity, and let's put compliance risk into it, to be one of the most resistant areas of the market to consolidation. The single platform idea, single glass of pain, which I love. Is that what it was, Mitch? It remains a unicorn, or not a unicorn, sorry, an unreachable, a windmill to tilt at. I do think, though, that AI has the opportunity here, brings the opportunity for consolidation from a vendor standpoint. There's a lot being done, like in observability platforms, and certain, partnerships like the one Mitch mentioned at RSAC, that help the operators manage this crazy spaghetti diagram of interdependent monitors and agents and so forth. It's just that security does not keep pace with, or doesn't go in lockstep with, technological development. So we were just talking about how, in one sense, we are still at early days with AI and AI-based development, very early days. Mitch was very eloquent on that point. As that tends to advance first. There is not a security-centric development, because security is always the punch bowl taker, cup away or whatever. It's always the one that has to come and say, "Now, hang on just a second." And it always has to do that in reaction. It should not be. It should be a driver of innovation, but it does not tend to be looked at that way. Nonetheless, the simplification that properly used AI can provide in taking very huge messes, spaghetti diagrams, and providing clarity into them could be the opportunity you're talking about.
I got to jump into that one because that term, I love that. I hadn't heard that before this. I'm surprised it took that long, a glass of pain. But this pane of glass, this platform we're going to have to finally solve our thing. I think it's a different way to look at it. And this might be a good context to help us think about it. Because we're talking about AIs, we're talking about large language models that are, for our purposes, effectively holographic storage systems, a narrative, right? So it's not so much a pane of glass that a company is going to use, but each stakeholder in different roles has different facets to look into it, right? And to your point, Guy, like when you're a security person looking into this data space, and you're looking at it from a security perspective, you should be able to see that interwoven in everything else that's going on, not as a separate box that's bolted onto by wires and a conduit process to some other box called engineering.
It also, I think, will enable the really correct approach of two of everything, two tools, because now adding things does not actually necessarily change your user experience. You could have two different agents doing the same thing. Two AI interfaces doing the same thing. But the view of the analyst, the IT analyst, expands without having to also expand the number of dials to twiddle or any of that other sort of thing. We just always, of course, have to remember human supervised. You still need to be an expert in these sort of things. You can't just, put, a newbie or a novice on a complex system because AI is there. You can't do that.
Mitch, last word on this, but I seem to remember talking to lots of IT and cybersecurity people, and nothing warms their hearts quite so much as waking up one morning to discover that this tool or platform that they really love just got acquired by some stranger. So,
Are they going to ruin it when they acquire it? Right? Yeah. Well, first of all, just a shout out to Krista Case and Fernando Montenegro, who did this research at Futurum. It's a really good point. I think that's a fair in anything that we really enjoy using, right? Whether it's a great desktop tool or something on our phones or security. I think there's a real possibility we may have something of an inflection point happen in security. Let me overstate it this way: we essentially kind of passively wait for attacks to happen and either block them or respond to them, or we're waiting for someone to, cross the line and then we're going to do something about it. Super oversimplification, but it's a defensive and response posture. To draw an analog to the software world, where software developers, product managers are going, or they're going to be prototyping. They're going to be using AI to generate new ideas and test concepts without ever deploying it into production as a real app, but maybe deploying it into production as a A/B test or something like that, or maybe even just pursuing ideas. Think of the same thing in the security world. What if I change my security architecture this way? Take the last 2 years of attacks and analyze that against this approach. And if I add vendor B into it instead of vendor A, how would that change my defense, my response, whatever? I want to change the way we structured our identity architecture. And now to be able to accommodate visual, voice, natural language, the new modalities of interface. All right, well, let me use AI to investigate and really prototype, maybe even try out some of those ideas. So instead of we're kind of building it and then trying to keep the fences, secure so nothing breaks through until we upgrade them to the next level for the next product or release, is really on the proactive end, be able to try ideas and test new options. And I can imagine that's a world where, I think Chris Blast's head would explode because he'd have so much fun, but because he's that kind of guy. But I can just imagine that would be like your nirvana, Chris.
I'm having exactly that kind of fun right now, right? And this, we'll get into this more over the coming weeks and so forth. But this is what some of us are working out in the world. The Civic AI node is a AI and a human being. So you have a certain form of trust, and you build networks of these, and for more discourse in the future, in theory, you can build a trust that's reliable enough to do things with. So I think we're, to our point here about individual companies writing codes and so forth. I hate to be this cliche, but yeah, I think things are going to change an awful lot. I've already changed for some, and the next year is going to see dramatic changes for many.
Well, guys, hey, to quote that great American philosopher, the times are a-changing. So stay tuned, because it's just going to be all kinds of fun in the next weeks, months, and years ahead. We'll be back in a minute.
Discover Techstrong Group, the epicenter of tech innovation. We're your go-to for reaching IT leaders and practitioners worldwide. Our secret? Impactful content that sparks awareness, engagement, and top-quality leads. With us, you'll access editorial websites, streaming videos, virtual events, custom content, analyst research, and more. Join our satisfied clients. Let's revolutionize your tech journey. Contact us today and tell your story to the world in the most powerful way with Techstrong Group.
Hey folks, we're back, and guess what? VMware is back in the news, and it seems like this company just cannot get out from underneath this move that they made. And for better or worse, it's a topic of discussion. Now there's a EU watchdog that is saying, well, basically the VMware changes to their licensing policies have resulted in 800 to 1500% hikes. And, they're basically not saying it's illegal, but they're questioning the morality of this. Guy, at some point, do we just kind of have to sit back and go, look, Broadcom made a decision. It's their decision to make, and everybody else has to make their own decision as a result from that. And maybe it's, I don't know, time to just get on with it.
Well, it's definitely time to just get on with it. When you hear EU and organization, you have a tendency to think that there's something governmental about it or quasi-governmental about it. So I want to really be clear here that CISP, which is the governing body, so to speak, for this Echo institution that I hadn't heard of before, that came out with the statement. This is C stands for cloud, and S for service, SP for service provider, and CISP. That this is a coalition of European cloud service providers, private, right? There's nothing quite. I so rarely use baseball metaphors, Mike, but I'm going to try to use one here. I know baseball, but I just don't follow it as closely as you do. This is like the Players Association complaining about the contract negotiation with the owners. And I just don't know the name of the Players Association for baseball. It really is. They have banded together. I mean, CISP was created because of a judgment against Microsoft, if I remember right, that Microsoft and so they just, I think it might have been Microsoft that said, look, we don't want to deal with, one of you at a time. You're in all different countries, even if you're all in the EU. That's years ago. Now it's Broadcom's turn. And my sense is that they are just publicizing a whole lot of plausible numbers, like 600% higher costs, and so on and so forth, to try to get Broadcom to come to the table. Who doesn't like perpetual licenses? Well, those are essentially dead. They're a thing of the past forever and ever. And the ones that are left are legacy. And that's not Broadcom. That's the market. Broadcom probably wants all of these cloud companies to remain profitable and to renew after 3 years. And maybe Broadcom wants to exit the market and make as much money, along the way as it can. That could be the situation as well. These are cloud providers. These are folks whose core job, unlike your typical enterprise, core job is to build resilient infrastructure and serve it to customers. They want to keep their costs down, but they need the infrastructure to be performant and to work and do all these things that VMware has been doing for years and years and years. However, Broadcom's strategic moves with VMware have made alternatives like Nutanix with AVH or with KVM, OpenStack, God help us, maybe even Zen, real alternatives to virtualized platforms look way more attractive. And Nutanix in particular is going quite aggressively at existing Broadcom business, doing things like allowing try before buy experiences and building up a pretty robust migration practice to try to take as much cost as possible out of the switch. And there's no reason cloud providers can't go in that direction. AHP is based on KVM. It's based on open source. The real question is, I think it comes down to your favorite topic, Mike, which is all the personnel, all the people who are actually running all this stuff, who have built their reputations and their careers on VMware. And this, if anything, this news is about the players. It's about those players, not the cloud folks, but all the people in Europe who have been running VMware forever and are crying out for relief at suddenly seeing their whole life work style threatened.
I mean, I will grant you that it has unfortunate consequences, but when I look over at Broadcom, they're not sitting there going, "Oh, please don't leave me, please don't leave me." They're basically saying, pay up or get out. It's not quite an eviction notice, but it's pretty damn close. So, Mitch, is this just something we need to factor into our thinking? I mean, did we get overly attached to a single vendor and somehow or other thought that they would be with us forever? And I'll go back and, point to some of the things that Keith Townsend's been writing. It's like pretty clear that VMware, its business model is unsustainable. Otherwise, it wouldn't have been acquired 3 or 4 times in the last 2 decades, right?
Well, I think you nailed it pretty well. They're a business. They're not an altruistic organization. They're there to serve their stockholders and make money for the company and return on investment. And they've got a captured market with VMware, and a very, very solid big market. And they didn't raise prices because it was easy to move off VMware. They raised prices because it's very hard to move off of that platform and onto another one. Not impossible, can be done, but you don't say, let's schedule, the weekend after Memorial Day to, we'll move off of VMware, move on to the next thing. It's a migration. It's an effort. It's akin to moving to the cloud, but maybe twice as complex in some ways, because you've got to unwind all the way down to what do you leave behind? What do you take onto the new platform? The new platform doesn't do things the way a really mature product like VMware does, but do you still need it done that way? So there's a lot of things to consider in moving it. There are a lot of options for moving, but you're not going to do it solely on the pricing of VMware, because there's a lot more cost into it to moving your infrastructure.
Mm-hmm. I do believe it's getting easier to move that infrastructure, and I'm not just talking about the VMs, but the stack that sits above that. And as time goes on, that may get even easier. So maybe Broadcom might have miscalculated how long or how hard it is to make that migration, but ultimately they still do the math and it comes out with this is our new price point and this is what it's going to be. So I don't know, Chris, you haven't jumped in on this one, but is this just the world we live in?
I'm probably the least qualified to give a pointillistic, state of the market one on this one, but I'll tell you what I in the first segment, Mike, you talked about the big players having advantages and so forth. There's a flip side of that as well. When you look at where VM is in the entire space, and yeah, they're huge, but they're also sort of fossilized, built in, tied in, and this is a good topic. Hell with the ransom of. So sometimes being big and filling the space isn't an advantage. And again, I'm not commenting on them. Their activities. We all know lots of folks that work there. Great company. However, without knowing the details that you guys probably know exactly where they are right now, I think that's a fair risk comment for them. I think they're not in a spot because they're so huge. They have all the advantages. Probably more the opposite. Probably need to think more flexibility than legacy.
Here's what I wonder is how important to Broadcom is the cloud provider community. Now, outside of hyperscalers, there are tons and tons of, especially in Europe, but it's true around the world, tons of cloud providers that are true cloud providers, on demand, pay as you go, et cetera, but for more traditional, let's say, enterprise applications. This coalition in Europe is a great example of it. And a lot of them are regionally based, serving their countries or a few countries or, language groups really, really well. And they have relied on VMware. VMware's initial play into the cloud, going back like 10, 12 years, was to try and be a new hyperscale platform. That failed utterly, but that's because it just wasn't the smooth move for something like a VMware, a closed, highly performant, highly capable and secure proprietary, resource allocation platform, resource pooling and allocation platform. But for these cloud providers, it has been terrific. And I just wonder, seems to me that Broadcom should be most interested in this customer set and least interested in the enterprise customer set, speaking strategically, not uninterested, especially for large enterprise, but strategically speaking across the broad, when you're going to try and find the so-called synergies and all that other sort of stuff.
I'm going to add two words to this, Guy. 2 words to this. One is mainframe, and the other one is tariffs. We still have mainframes around, right? We'll still have VMware running in people's data centers forever. But I'm going to draw a loosely coupled analogy to tariffs. It's the same problem of do we pass on the price increases as a cloud provider to the underlying cost of the infrastructure software, VMware, that we run in the cloud so that customers can run their VMware in the cloud instead of their own data center? Or do we eat that cost? They don't want to eat that cost. So that's what's driving this behavior, is they're saying, look, our costs are going up. You have a gun to our head. We don't have a choice. We don't want to raise prices on our customers. Maybe we're locked in on price for some period of time, and we weren't as savvy about our contracts with VMware. I'm just surmising.
That's another analogy to tariffs too. Yeah.
Yeah. So it is it's not a tariff, but it's the same effect where those costs go up that aren't in your control, and you've got to pass them on to customers. So guess who the next group that's not happy is your customers.
I would take this as a public negotiation over licensing. That's just like the sport analogy, the Players Association negotiating with the owners, and ultimately through maybe a high stakes, or a very melodramatic communications war, they will come to an agreement.
Or they could just go to the great mediator in Mar-a-Lago and he'll help them sort this all out, right?
He'll fix it on day one.
There you go.
On day one, it'll be fixed.
All right. I'm gonna leave this here, but I would just point out one thing. Decisions that are made in anger usually don't turn out as well as you hope. So take a minute, take a breath, and think about it long and hard before you decide what you're going to do. There's no right answer, but just know that there's cost either way you look. Hey, I want to thank everybody for being on the show today and sharing their insights as always. And I want to thank you all for spending some time with us once again. Please stay tuned. There's some awesome content coming up right behind us on the Techstrong TV lineup as always. Until then, we'll see you tomorrow.